I remember my closest friend in college sobbing the day she turned 21. The best part of my life is over. I'm not young anymore. She was a senior, nearing graduation. I was a precocious freshman, just 16. Mystified, I tried lamely to comfort her, saying that I didn't think 21 was so old. Actually, I didn't understand at all what could be demoralizing about turning 21. To me, it meant only something good, being in charge of oneself, being free. At 16, I was too young to have noticed and become confused by the peculiarly loose, ambivalent way in which this society demands that one stop thinking of oneself as a girl and start thinking of oneself as a woman. In America, that demand can now be put off to the age of 30, even beyond. But even if I thought her distress was absurd, I must have been aware that it would not simply be absurd, but quite unthinkable in a boy turning 21. Only women worry about age with that degree of inanity and pathos. And of course, as with all crises that are inauthentic and therefore repeat themselves compulsively, because the danger is largely fictive, a poison in the imagination, this friend of mine went on having the same crisis over and over, each time as if for the first time. I also came to her 30th birthday party. A veteran of many love affairs, she had spent most of her 20s living abroad and had just returned to the United States. She had been good looking when I first knew her. Now she was beautiful. I teased her about the tears she had shed over being 21. She laughed and claimed not to remember. But 30, she said ruefully, that really is the end. Soon after, she married. My friend is now 44. While no longer what people call beautiful, she is striking looking, charming, and vital. She teaches elementary school. Her husband, who is 20 years older than she, is a part-time merchant seaman. They have one child, now 9 years old. Sometimes when her husband is away, she takes a lover. She told me recently that 40 was the most upsetting birthday of all. I wasn't at that one. And although she has only a few years left, she means to enjoy them while they last. She has become one of those women who sees every excuse offered in any conversation for mentioning how old they really are, in a spirit of bravado, compounded with self-pity that is not too different from the mood of women who regularly lie about their age. But she is actually fretting much less about aging than she was 2 decades ago. Having a child and having one rather late, past the age of 30, has certainly helped to reconcile her to her age. At 50, I suspect, she will be ever more valiantly postponing the age of resignation. My friend is one of the more fortunate, sturdier casualties of the aging crisis. Most women are not as spirited, nor as innocently comic in their suffering. But almost all women endure some version of this suffering, a recurrent seizure of the imagination that usually begins quite young, in which they project themselves into a calculation of loss. The rules of this society are cruel to women. Brought up to be never fully adult, women are deemed obsolete earlier than men. In fact, most women don't become relatively free and expressive sexually until their 30s. Women mature sexually this late, certainly much later than men, not for innate biological reasons, but because this culture retards women. Denied most outlets for sexual energy permitted to men, it takes many women that long to wear out some of their inhibitions. The time at which they start being disqualified as sexually attractive persons is just when they have grown up sexually. The double standard about aging cheats women of those years between 35 and 50, likely to be the best of their sexual life. That women expect to be flattered often by men and the extent to which their self-confidence depends on this flattery reflects how deeply women are psychologically weakened by this double standard. Added on to the pressure felt by everybody in this society to look young as long as possible are the values of femininity, which specifically identify sexual attractiveness in women with youth. The desire to be the right age has a special urgency for a woman it never has for a man. A much greater part of her self-esteem and pleasure in life is threatened when she ceases to be young. Most men experience getting older with regret, apprehension. But most women experience it even more painfully, with shame. Aging is a man's destiny, something that must happen because he is a human being. For a woman, aging is not only her destiny, because she is that more narrowly defined kind of human being. A woman, it is also her vulnerability. To be a woman is to be an actress. Being feminine is a kind of theater, with its appropriate costumes, decor, lighting, the stylized gestures. From early childhood on, girls are trained to care in a pathologically exaggerated way about their appearance and are profoundly mutilated to the extent of being unfitted for first-class adulthood by the extent of the stress put on presenting themselves as physically attractive objects. Women look in the mirror more frequently than men do. It is virtually their duty to look at themselves, to look often. Indeed, a woman who is not narcissistic is considered unfeminine. And a woman who spends literally most of her time caring for and making purchases to flatter her physical appearance is not regarded in the society as what she is, the kind of moral idiot. She is thought to be quite normal and is envied by other women whose time is mostly used up at jobs or caring for large families. The display of narcissism goes on all the time. It is expected that women will disappear several times in an evening, at a restaurant, at a party, during a theater intermission, in the course of a social visit, simply to check their appearance, to see that nothing has gone wrong with their makeup and hairstyling, to make sure that their clothes are not spotted or too wrinkled or not hanging properly. It is even acceptable to perform this activity in public. At the table in a restaurant, over coffee, a woman opens a compact mirror and touches up her makeup and hair without embarrassment in front of her husband or her friends. All this behavior, which is written off as normal, quote, vanity, end of quote, in women, would seem ludicrous in a man. Women are more vain than men because of the relentless pressure on women to maintain their appearance at a certain high standard. What makes the pressure even more burdensome is that there are actually several standards. Men present themselves as face and body, a physical whole. Women are split, as men are not, into a body and a face, each judged by somewhat different standards. What is important for a face is that it be beautiful. What is important for a body is two things, which may even be, depending on fashion and taste, somewhat incompatible. First, that it be desirable, and second, that it be beautiful. Men usually feel sexually attracted to women much more because of their bodies than their faces. The traits that arouse desire, such as fleshiness, don't always match those that fashion decrees as beautiful. For instance, the ideal woman's body promoted in advertising in recent years is extremely thin. The kind of body that looks more desirable clothed than naked. But women's concern with their appearance is not simply geared to arousing desire in men. It also aims at fabricating a certain image by which, as a more indirect way of arousing desire, women state their value. A woman's value lies in the way she represents herself, which is much more by her face than her body. In defiance of the laws of simple sexual attraction, women do not devote most of their attention to their bodies. the well-known normal narcissism that women display, the amount of time they spend before the mirror, is used primarily in caring for the face and hair. Women do not simply have faces as men do. They are identified with their faces. Men have a naturalistic relation to their faces. Certainly they care whether they are good looking or not. They suffer over acne, protruding ears, tiny eyes. They hate getting bald. But there is a much wider latitude in what is aesthetically acceptable in a man's face than what is in a woman's. A man's face is defined as something he basically doesn't need to tamper with. All he has to do is keep it clean. He can avail himself of the options for ornament supplied by nature, a beard, a mustache, longer or shorter hair. But he's not supposed to disguise himself. What he is really like is supposed to show. A man lives through his face. It records the progressive stages of his life. And since he doesn't tamper with his face, it is not separate from, but is completed by his body, which is judged attractive by the impression it gives of virility and energy. By contrast, a woman's face is potentially separate from her body. She does not treat it naturalistically. A woman's face is the canvas upon which she paints a revised, corrected portrait of herself. One of the rules of this creation is that the face not show what she doesn't want it to show. Her face is an emblem, an icon, a flag. How she arranges her hair, the type of makeup she uses, the quality of her complexion, all these are signs not of what she is really like, but of how she asks to be treated by others, especially men. They establish her status as an object.